Okay, we can see now here in the summer of 1935 that even though it was going to be some years before the steps were written out, these people have recovered as results of these steps. This work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but occasionally heartening success. When the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at that time. And when he left, Bill left, and when Bill was there for a couple of 3 months, when he left, the group had started. He went back to New York, and when Bill went back to New York, he applied what he learned in Akron. He didn't go back to New York telling the alcoholics about his vital spiritual experience. He went back to New York and started telling them what their problem was and what their solution was, and then about how the program of action, and he became successful, and the group started in New York. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered the dark world of the alcoholic. Now, in 1937, Bill went back to Akron. A second small group had promptly taken shape in New York, and besides, there were scattered alcoholics who picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, were trying to form AA groups in other cities. And on a second visit, Bill went back to Akron again, not to see Dr. Bob, not to do what he did, but he went back on the same, trying to take over the same company, thank God, which they never could take over.
Stubborn and bullheaded, working on it still. 2 years later, going to get the company.
And while he was there, he visited with Dr. Bob there on Ardmore at Dr. Bob's home. And as they began to talk, he said, well, they begin to say, well, this counted heads, and this thing is working. Maybe if we got some ideas here, these things that we're doing could help other people. And they said, what do you think we should do about it? And neither one of them wanted to make that decision. Maybe this was the first instance of the group conscience, because they decided to have a meeting that night. And they had a meeting at T. Henry Williams's home. These were the people in the Oxford groups. They were non-alcoholic people who were very helpful in the early days. And there were 18, they invited the people in the Akron area, and there were 18 people at the group, and trying to decide how they could handle this message or how they could get it over to other people. And they voted that night on 3 things. They voted, number 1, to build a chain of hospitals across the country to treat alcoholics. And they ain't got a dime, And secondly, they voted to hire and train a group of paid missionaries to carry this message. And thirdly, they decided to write a book. The third thing they did was decide to write a book. And the reason they wanted to write the book was kind of twofold. They needed to write the book because already in these 2 years, the message passed on by word of mouth was becoming garbled by the alcoholics. It's garbled even with the book. But and they also felt, that they could make enough money off of this book to set up these hospitals and hire these missionaries. So that was twofold purpose. It was now time that the struggling group thought to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publishing of this volume. And this started in 1937, and the book was written throughout that time, and it was published in 1939. Okay, the fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from its title of its book. And there was a lot of discussions, a lot of argument. We'll talk later about this book and what a miracle it is that we have this book. 40 alcoholics wrote this book. Because Bill was the principal writer, but there were 40 alcoholics. Can you imagine 40 alcoholics doing anything, let alone writing a book? I had a group in my neighborhood where they had a 4-hour meeting trying to decide to put in a Coke machine or a Pepsi machine. Okay. Now, once the book was published, there was a lot of discussion about what to call the book, and this was the argument of the day in the meetings, what we're going to call the book. And they wanted to weigh out, they had, Bill wanted to, one time, his ego got involved, he wanted to call it the BW Movement by Bill Wilson. A lot of Dark Before Dawn, a lot of other names, and finally they did decide on the word Alcoholics, and now we Alcoholics will remain anonymous, and that came the title of their book. Now, 40 people started this. They got the book published. They named the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So the first thing on the face of this earth named Alcoholics Anonymous was this book. You know, and then the fellowship took the name off the book and called themselves Alcoholics Anonymous. So there are two Alcoholics Anonymous. One is the book, and the other is the fellowship. And thank God the book has not been changed. The book, we got the same program in this book we had in 1939, but the program in that fellowship has changed. As people come into the fellowship, they've brought all kind of stuff in. They bring all their little things and they tear down and thank God we still got this program in the book. And sometimes you go to the program in the fellowship, you don't know where you're at. I mean, if they didn't read the preamble, you wouldn't know what kind of meeting they was having. So we're not going to be talking about that program in the fellowship. No, we can't even. This weekend we're going to spend the week talking about the program in this wonderful book, Alcoholics Anonymous. The same thing we had in 1939. And it's up to you, and it's up to me, and it's up to all of us. When you go back to your group, listen what goes on in your group. Compare it to what really is going on in the book. And this is where we're at today. We're going to be talking about the program, the same program of the first 100 people in 1939.
I think it's important that we do let people know that the first Alcoholics Anonymous that the world ever saw was the book Alcoholics Anonymous. The fellowship at that time had no name. Oh, they were referred to sometimes as the drunk squads of the Oxford groups and various other different things, but they really were nameless. And after the book was published, then the fellowship took the name from the book. And today, when you say Alcoholics Anonymous, well, everybody thinks about the fellowship of men and women. But the real Alcoholics Anonymous is the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. And of course, in 1939, the two programs were the same.
That's right.
The program in the fellowship, the program in the book was identical because the people in the program had written the book. And the one in the book has remained the same, but the one in the fellowship has certainly changed. Let's see what the percentage of recovery used to be when the fellowship program and the book program were the same. Let's go over to Roman numeral 20. Public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons. The large number of recoveries in reunited homes. These made their impressions everywhere. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. So it's easy to see when the fellowship program and the book program were the same, at least 75% of the people who came here and tried our program recovered from the disease. I wonder what that I wonder what it is today. Now, I wonder if it's 75% today, or 50%, or 25%. We're beginning to see and hear figures that less than 10% of those who come to AA today manage to recover from the disease of alcoholism. And I've got to believe that it's not so much the people as it is the lack of program. Now, people say the new people today aren't interested, or they came to us from treatment centers, or the judges are sending them here, or they really don't want to stop drinking, they just want to get the heat off their back. I don't really believe alcoholics are that much different today than they were back in the 1930s. You know, they came to us out of treatment centers in the 1940s. Dr. Bob ran one of the most successful treatment centers the world's ever seen. He treated over 5,000 people in a treatment center there in Akron before he died. People were coming to us from judges back in the 1930s and 40s. People were coming to us to get the heat off the back. They really didn't want to stop drinking. They just came to get, It's always been that way. I think the problem today is nobody's really standing up for the AA program. In our zeal to get everybody to like us and be sure we don't run anybody off, we tell them they can do whatever they want to, and naturally they're going to do whatever they want to. And they're going to talk about whatever they know to talk about. It's what they've learned wherever they've been. And it's really the responsibility of we older members of AA to say, hey, look, that's not the AA program. Here's the AA program. And try to help those people understand we do have a program and try to help them work the steps so they can recover also. I think too many of us have opted to back out and say, well, we can't identify with the new people, so we're just going to stay home. And when we do, then we turn it over to the sickest of the sickest, and then we wonder why AA really isn't working anymore. I really think that's our responsibility as older members of AA to insist on that. Now, I know we can't force it on them, and I know we can't make them do anything, but I know we can lead them, and I know we can talk about the program, and I know we can insist under any circumstances when it's our turn to talk to say what we think we need to say. And if they don't want to hear it, that's their problem, but at least we can say it. And when I say it, when I go home from the meeting, I feel better. Whether they accept it or not is really beside the point. It makes me feel better to be able to say those things that need to be said, I think, in a kind and a loving way to the best of our ability. I really think it's our responsibility. If we could do that and get these literally hundreds and thousands coming to us today into the program itself, not just the fellowship, but into the program, my God, we can avert death in hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people in a relatively short period of time.